now recording. All right.
All right.
Okay, so maybe it's to tell them of God's great kindness. Kach v'kach b'nei esrim v'acharei kol davar u'magefa yimnam lodia ki hu masgila goyim imchatz v'yadav. Okay, and maybe it's also that God counts them after any plague or affliction that strikes them. He says that's the explanation for Rashi, that it came after they were punished by one, presumably after the sin of the golden calf. Sorry. Okay, Bamidbar Sinai Rabbah. So he quotes now the Midrash Rabbah. We're a few lines down. Ra'iti kach b'mispar shemot legugol. Ra'iti kach b'mispar shemot legugol otam. V'ar l'kadosh baruch hu limnotam b'chvod u'b'gdula l'chol echad ve'echad. Lo tieh omer l'rosh hamishpacha kama b'mishpatecha kama banim yesh lecha. Right, that the command was to count each one of them by family, by tribe, by clan. Right, that specifically Moshe didn't say go to each head of the family, head of the tribe, and say how many in your family, how many in your tribe. Ela kulhun yihun ovrin lefanecha. Rather, each one of them should pass before you individually. Ve'ema u'vechavod. Ve'atamo ne'otam, and you should count each individual. Hadahu dichtiv mispar shemot miben esrim shana v'mala legugol otam. Right, head by head, you have to count them. Says this is the standard way that kings would count their army before going out to war. They would count each individual soldier. Because now they were ready to enter the land and go to fight. We can stop there. Okay, so the Ramban is very sensitive to the fact that we're told to count each individual head by head. Says, right, that's because they're about to go to the war, right? It shows the great love for them, right? And many point out that it shows the value of each individual Jew. That we don't care only about what the sum total is, but we care about each individual who makes up that total. Your question becomes even stronger if that's the case, where we're excluding a good number of people, and it really is emphasizing God's love of everybody. So that's a big problem. Unfortunately, we don't have a great answer to. But along these lines, and this is the first major Shavuot connection that I have. So this is from Rabbi Avishai David, who is a Rosh Yeshiva in Israel. Was one of a close student of Rabbi Soloveitchik. So he has a book on the Parsha, which is conveying Rabbi Soloveitchik's ideas. It's unclear. It doesn't tell you exactly where the lines draw between what Rabbi Soloveitchik said and what he's adding on. But he says as follows. Every census has two goals. One goal is ascertain the total number of the Jewish people. This is similar to taking an inventory of our possessions in order to know the total number of assets that we possess. The second goal is to count in order to get to know each individual. How was Moshe able to accomplish this second goal? Moshe was familiar with the public in general, but did not know them on an individual basis. And tying into other pieces of Rabbi Soloveitchik's Parshanut, he talks about how the entire relationship of Moshe to the Jewish people and of us to Hashem changes after the shattering of the first luchot, of the first tablets. Had the first luchot not been broken, Moshe would have functioned as the agent of the Jewish people and simply required the consent of the sender, the Jewish people as a whole. After the breaking of the luchot and the division of the written and oral law, Moshe became the Rebbe of the entire Jewish people, and a Rebbe must know all his students. Therefore, God commanded Moshe at the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar Take a census of the entire assembly of Israel according to their families, according to their father's household, by number of the names, every male according to their head count. God's intent was a dual one. It was not enough for Moshe to know the total number of the Jewish people. He had to perform a head count in order to get to know each person as an individual with their own background and life experience. Moshe's additional obligation emanates from the fact that he was Rabban Shel Yisrael, the Rebbe of the entire Jewish nation, and therefore had to know every Jew by name. It was as though God were telling him, Moshe, when you pray, you will pray not only for the general public, but also for every Jew in his or her moments of joy and pain. So why the count of each individual according to this?
To make the acquaintance of each of the Talmidim, but that creates a dilemma. It's the dilemma that Yisro is going to come to try to solve, because if you have one Rebbe for 600,000 plus people, that doesn't give you much time to do anything else
right.
during the 48 hours of the day.
Right. So we could say, well, put that technical issue aside, right? The ideal or the vision is that we're creating this relationship, right? We might also respond that Yitro was not reacting to Moshe as acting as Rebbe, he was acting to Moshe as acting as posek or judge, which is a different role, right? That a person, you're right. A Rebbe, even a Rebbe has his limits, and is it possible to be a Rebbe to 1.2 million or however many people there were? Maybe, maybe not, and to really have a personal relationship, but that at least that was the idea being conveyed. That as, right, and specifically as we prepare for Chag HaShavuot, to think about, right, our connection to Torah, right, and who are the Rebbeim, that we need to be able to have that that level of personal interaction and leadership is, I think, a beautiful vision of what Torah can and should be. Right? Whether it's logistically and feasibly possible, we can leave those questions for a different time. But that fundamentally, the point of the count, according to this, was for Moshe to forge a relationship with each individual Jew, not just be some abstract idea, there's a lot of them out there, I care about them, but to really try to drill down and create an individual connection is a beautiful thought. Any other reactions to sort of Rabbi David / Soloveitchik's idea?
Yeah, it seems to me that also from the point of view of the people being counted, knowing that the person counting is interested in you as an individual is very empowering in some way. Right. So it goes both ways. It's not just that Moshe has to feel a connection, but that they should feel connected to Moshe, that Moshe cares about me and that he's someone that I can approach and that I can go to. It goes both ways.
I had another thought about it. When I was looking at the numbers and then thinking about the sizes of the different groups and all, and how that worked out in terms of the 4 flags, the Degalim, and where they were located, I was thinking about it a little bit, maybe like a commander trying to figure out how he was going to set up his defenses and what he was going to do. It occurred to me that in a situation like this, the dignity of every individual is very important, and the dignity of every tribe is very important, because the order in which the names are given is very interesting. The order is first some of the children of Leah, minus Levi, and then we have the children of Benjamin, and then some children of the wives and the others. And we know from the story of Yosef that sometimes there would be subgroups within the tribes and things like that. And I was just wondering whether, the issue of hierarchy and all of that within a fighting force, and making sure that all of the best people are put in the right place. Because if you just start out with the birth order, we don't have the birth order, right?
Right,
Not the
right.
birth order. So, okay, so what order is it and why? Was another whole question, because I thought, well, one of them is thinking, at least hopefully Yehoshu or somebody is thinking about how are we going to best defend, and where should the best fighters be? So, for example, you have Ruvain and Shimon together with Gad, who's known to be a very good fighter, but who would you think that he would necessarily wind up there? You know, could you have predicted that ahead of time? Only if you look at the numbers.
Okay.
And the numbers with Yehuda are the largest, so he's up at the front, and Issachar and Zevulun are there, but you know, they are there, we know, because of their connection with the Levies and setting up the calendar and other things. Maybe, at least it's the Issachar, not necessarily Zevulun. But the numbers for Binyamin and Ephraim and Manasseh, obviously they're too much bigger than the little, but they are together smaller, the smallest group, but they are kind of behind, in a way, Yehuda. But the ones who are marching in the north and in the south are roughly the same numbers, and yet they have one very pugilistically notable tribe with them. So in a way, it's a way of saying, okay, let's see who's got the largest tribe. Maybe that'll make a difference about where we put them, where their numbers are.
It's a great thought, a great theory. Maybe we can find occasion as we move through Sefer Bamidbar to spend some time with these details and explore exactly how the camp might have been organized, because I think you're onto something, and it's you're tickling my curiosity with what you're saying also. So maybe we'll revisit that question as we move through the Sefer.
I thought that the largest numbers and the way Dr. Solomon expressed it, the most gifted or talented warriors were where the threat was most likely to come from. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what she's suggesting, and we're trying, you know, that there's a lot of different theories, and, you know, pointing out that they're not organized by birth order, so there must be something else going on. We'll try to find occasion to delve a little bit more into that, because there's a lot to say on that. But for now, I wanted to switch gears and look at a different explanation for this census. And the starting point is actually in source number 7. We'll skip over the Abravanel for a second. And it's the previous time that we were given a commandment to count, which is in Parshat Kitisa. And how is the census conducted in Parshat Kitisa? How did Moshe count them there?
You count the money, not the people.
Yeah, right. Zeitnu kol aver bikudim achatzita shekel b'sher kol hakodesh. Right, everyone should give a half shekel, and that's how they were going to be counted. So all sorts of explanations are given as to why a half shekel, and you know why they don't count them. You know, a head count. Why it has to be a shekel count. So there's a really interesting debate here, because when we go to Sefer Bamidbar, there's a debate about how our count was conducted in Sefer Bamidbar. Did it follow the same model as in Sefer Shmot? Right? Could they conduct a head count, or did they have to collect coins or something else? Right? Is there some intrinsic prohibition against counting the Jewish people? And this comes up in the census, right? Not only questions of question was asked, can Jews participate in a census in America and France and England, right? But in Israel, where you're counting majority Jews and the count is being done by a Jewish government, is it permissible to conduct a census, a direct count of the people, or is there something wrong with that, right? The way that we count a minyan, we don't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's a shiat hamecha. We use some way to not put a number on people. So the Abravanel says that what we did in Sefer Shmot has no bearing on what was done in Sefer Bamidbar. Sefer Shmot, they did a census at the same time that they were collecting funds and materials to build the Mishkan. So therefore, the donation that everybody gave was to be part of the contributions of the Mishkan. But if there is no capital campaign going on, right? Marcia tells me I have to remind you that there's the shul campaign. If you haven't donated yet, you should donate, right? But that, right? If there is no campaign, if there is no need for money, for coins, for silver, then there's no issue with counting them, with conducting a head count. And so he says in Sefer Bamidbar, that's what they did. He counted the individuals by, without anything else, without any other means of counting. The Malbim, number 9, disagrees strongly. Right? He says, without going into great, he says there's a lot to contradict and to attack the Abravanel, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but this is why I think he's wrong. L'dati gam inyan shebamidbar uve'arvot Moav hagam shayal gulgolet nitnu gam shkalim. The counts in Bamidbar that were conducted, they also did it via collecting a coin from each individual. Kikvar bi'arti b'perish Shmuel bet shema shehaminyan mezik al negef yishbo gimel tamim. Right. Elsewhere in Tanakh, when David was punished for counting the nation in Shmuel bet, he says that there's 3 harms, three things that go wrong when the people are counted by a head count. Aleph, mitzad ayin hara. Right. The first is there's this idea of the ayin hara, the evil eye somehow falls on people when you count them individually. I don't really fully understand how the ayin hara works or what it is, but that seems to be an accepted explanation. Bet. Mitzad she'ein habracha shora ela bedavar hasamui mina ayin. Says a bracha, a blessing, can only fall on something which is hidden from the eye. Sheyispor otam tisulak habracha. If you count the individual, then there is nothing hidden from the eye, right? You're saying each individual, this is 1, 2, 3. And so therefore there's nothing hidden, and therefore the bracha, whatever blessing God wanted to bestow upon them, remember what Rashi said, that Rashi thinks the point of the count was to show God's love and presumably for God to bless the Jewish people, right? You're going to defeat it by counting them as individuals. Gam Zeviarti, so he says, I also explained this elsewhere, we don't need to get into it now. And then he says the third reason. Od katafti sham tam gimel. The third reason. Ki kol od sha'am mit'achadim v'hem kulam ke'ish echad zechut harabim gadol me'od. As long as the nation is unified, they're all as one person, as one united person, then there's a great merit for them. Aval shemonim otam she'az mafridim kol ish bifnei atzmo. But when you count them and you separate out each individual by him or herself, yichupsu ma'asehem va'az yishlat behem negef, and you inspect the deeds of each individual, right, and you're able to see what each person did wrong. So then they're vulnerable to whatever plague or attack, affliction might come. Yatakin zeh tziva shekol echad that should be yitain machatzita shekel. So therefore, God commanded that each person should give a half shekel. Shezeh mover al agudatam. Why a half shekel? Because a half only makes sense with another half, right? You need a half shekel to show that we need to be united. Shekol yachid hurak machatzit. Every individual on their own is only a half. Lo davar shalem, is not complete. Tzarich sheyitztarif echad imo ad yaseh kedavar shalem. Have to join together with someone else to become whole. Mashal ha'ashir, okay, etc., etc. So he says it, right? Every count, every census had to be done in this way of a machatzita shekel, of a half shekel, in order to drive home the point that we can't stand on our individual merit, our individual basis, right? That we need to join together with the broader community, and that's the way that we remain strong, and that's the way that we achieve our full potential. And that's what the Malbim says. So the Malbim says, because of this, every time a census was conducted, it would have to be done through collecting a coin or something else. You could not count each individual in any circumstance, as opposed to the Abarvanel.
There's another census that takes place during the Midbar almost every day. That was the provision of man for the entire people. There was no need to do a physical count by Moshe or Aaron to signal we need 5,000 tons of man today and maybe 4,950 tomorrow. Or comes Shabbos and we need a double count and so on. So for whom was the census? Ribbono Shel Olam does not need the census to know.
Right. So I think the Malbim would say that the census was done for the Jewish people, right? That it was to drive home this message that they need to be united, and they need, right, specifically perhaps as they're being divided by tribe into their respective camps to march through the desert, right? That they needed a reminder perhaps that we're part of something greater, that we're part of a broader community, a part of Jewish people. Maybe that's why it comes specifically now. Or, you know, he doesn't say why specifically now. He just gets into the mechanics of how the census was done for this reason, but I'm conjecturing that might be one explanation as to why he would say it had to be done specifically now. Okay, one more step in this whole idea, and this is the Shavuos tie-in. So we're going to read, please God, Monday morning, as we read the Aseret HaDibrot and the build-up up to it. We read in Sefer Shemot, source number 10, chapter 19. B'chodesh hashlishi, l'tzeit b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, bayom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai. So in the third month of their departing Egypt, they came to the Sinai desert. Vayisum miRefidim, they left Refidim. Vayavo'u midbar Sinai, they came to the Sinai desert. Vayachanu b'midbar, they camped in the desert. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged hahar, Israel camped next to or against the mountain. So there's a very, 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 very famous Rashi on this pasuk. What does Rashi say about Vayichan sham Yisrael? Israel camped there.
It's in the singular.
Ish echad b'levach.
Oh, yeah.
As one person with one heart, right? And what's there? Someone. So I didn't see who was speaking. So someone gave the textual basis for that Rashi.
I mentioned it.
That was Anne, because it says Vayichan, right? It changes from the plural to the singular. So Vayichan Sham Yisrael, they camp as one person, and that's the basis, presumably, for this midrash. Fascinating. I've heard this idea given over. It's a thought from Rav Yitzchak Hutner. I heard someone share this in the aftermath of the tragedy in Meron, and unfortunately, we're still dealing with tragedy and suffering in Israel on a different scale and a different cause. But the Hutner points out a remarkable thing. A bit earlier on in Sefer Shemot, we have, after Bnei Israel leave Egypt, right, Paro has a change of heart, or God changes Paro's heart, right, unclear exactly if it's Paro's free will or God forcing his hand, but Paro has a change of heart. And so after he sent the Jews away, we know that he pursues after them. And the Torah there tells us, in source number 12, Uparo hikriv, vayisub b'nei Yisrael teinehem, v'hinei Mitzrayim nosea acharehem. Vayeru be'od, vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem. Paro comes close, drew near, and b'nei Yisrael lift their eyes and they see Egypt nosea acharehem, chasing after them, and they're very scared and they scream to God. The same thing happens in this pasuk, right? It changes from the Egyptians being in the third person to being being in the plural to being in the singular.
Yep.
Prime nosea acharehem. Egypt was chasing after them. Rashi there says Nosea acharehem, belev echad ki'ish echad. With one heart as one person. Sound familiar? Sort of, right? The exact same idea, one person, one heart, but the order is reversed. When Bnei Israel were camped at Har Sinai, it was ki'ish echad belev echad, as one person with one heart. When Egypt is chasing after Bnei Israel, it's belev echad, first comes the heart, with one heart, ki'ish echad, as one person. What's the difference? Anyone want to venture a guess before we see what Rav Hutner says?
Well, if the heart is meant to symbolize the emotions, then one group is leading only with their hatred, with their emotions. And the other group is aware of something greater, both their own unity and their connection with God. And their heart is then follows, they can then have the power to work on their emotions to change.
Okay, interesting. So Egypt, the Lev Echad coming first might show that they were directed only by their emotional state. And with the Ish Echad, the person coming first might show that it's more than just the emotional factor. That's an interesting suggestion. So here's what Rav Hutner has to say. We'll just look at the English. Concerning the Egyptians' pursuit at the sea, they said, with one heart as one person. But concerning Israel's camping at Sinai, it is the opposite, as one person with one heart. We must be sensitive to this change. It may be compared to the following. Since the right hand and left hand of Reuven belong to the same person, therefore, whatever the right hand wants, the left hand also wants. But when we are talking of two separate people, then the order is opposite. Since Reuven wants something, and Shimon wants the same thing, they join together. Therefore, Israel is always unified. It follows that when they rest in singular language, Vayichan Sham, the meaning is since they are as one person, the individuals among them are like the right hand and the left hand of one body. They are therefore with one heart, and they all want to camp at Mount Sinai. Egypt is different, as they are always divided. When they pursue in the singular language, the meaning is that since they all want to pursue the Jewish people, they join together for one purpose. They are with one heart as one person. What's the distinction that he's making between the unity of Bnei Israel and the unity of the Egyptians?
Go ahead.
That the unity of the Egyptians was strictly for this one outing. And it probably wouldn't last past this project of pursuing the Israelite slaves.
Right. It was totally utilitarian, right? As long as they agree on what they want, so they can join together. They can join together. But as soon as that goal is achieved, or they lose out on that goal, they're going to all go their separate ways and forget about the fact that they had joined together and that they experienced this moment of unity. But Bnei Israel at Har Sinai enter into a covenant where we are Ish Echad, right? Where, at least in theory or ideally, we should always desire the same thing as our fellow Jew. Unfortunately, we often don't live up to this, right? And we're often highlighting and emphasizing the differences that exist among the Jewish people. But that at Har Sinai, and as we prepare for Shavuot, we need to be reminded of this. And unfortunately, during times of tragedy and times of adversity, it's often easier to remember this lesson. And we wish we didn't need the reminder of missiles falling throughout the country of Israel to remind us of this. But that we are fundamentally united in all that we do. And it's not just to achieve one specific purpose or one specific goal and then everyone goes on their merry ways, but that at Har Sinai, we became Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. We became one person, which should be totally united and totally unified in all that we desire and all that we want to do. And if there's a Jew in Australia who wants to accomplish something, so we in Baltimore should feel connected and equally as desirous to achieve that goal, because we are united with the covenant that was forged at Har Sinai. And so it's the exact opposite of what the Ramban, Rabbi Soloveitchik, said at the beginning of this year, right? That the point of the census is not about the individual. The point of the census is to remind us, and you could say specifically in preparation for Chag HaShavuot, where we symbolically receive the Torah again, and we commit ourselves to the covenant that was forged at Sinai, right? That we conducted a census in order to remind us of the need to come together as one unified people, that we need the entire community, as opposed to the Ramban and Rabbi Soloveitchik, who say that the census here, in preparation for Ma'amad Har Sinai, was about the individual, about each individual being able to forge a relationship with Moshe as the Rebbe, representing the Torah which we're about to study and receive. And so I leave it to you, which one resonates more. I think, there's certainly elements of Rabbi Soloveitchik that very much speak to me as I think about what Torah represents. And there's certainly elements of, we'll call it the Malbim's approach, and Rav Hutner, about the need for Jewish unity and coming together, and the need for the entire community. So we have two polar opposite explanations of the census, which both hold lessons that are vital and crucial and true, I think, as we prepare for Shavuot. You don't have any final questions or thoughts on any of this?
Both those thoughts are true, and we
Right.
think both them also. So,
And I think that might be the lesson of Shavuot also, right? That we talk about the Torah Emet, the Torah of truth, but the Torah of truth contains multiple truths in it, and even diametrically opposed truths that each have to, each get their playtime, and each are relevant in their own time, in their own way. And so to be able to live with those conflicting truths is another crucial lesson, I think, as we prepare for Shavuot, that it's not just this is the way it has to be, but that there is a complexity and a nuance to the way that that life plays itself out that is crucial to our relationship with Torah as well.
Elu v'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so this Shavuot, I think as we're still feeling COVID and still feeling quasi-quarantining and not exactly sure what is, and I think there's an emphasis this year perhaps on the need for community, even if we can't fully experience community. But what makes that community strong is that we value each individual. And so looking forward to Shabbos, Parshat Bamidbar this coming Shabbos, and Shavuot, where we can reflect on and recommit ourselves to the covenant that was forged at Sinai, both with the individual and with the community at the same time.
the same age.
Happy Rosh Chodesh.
And a good Chodesh as well, yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.